It was a quiet Tuesday morning when Jake first noticed the car. He had just finished his morning coffee, sitting on the porch of his farmhouse, enjoying the serene view of his sprawling property. The farm had been his sanctuary for the past 5 years, a place where he could escape the chaos of city life. But today something was off. As he walked toward his garage to fetch some tools, he saw it. A sleek, black sedan parked inside his garage. Not on the driveway, not near the barn, but right inside his garage. Jake blinked, thinking he might be seeing things. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. The car was still there, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Confused, Jake walked closer. The car was a high-end model, the kind that screamed wealth and entitlement. He glanced around, half expecting to see someone nearby, but the property was empty. No note, no message, no explanation. Just a car parked in his garage as if it belonged there. Jake's first thought was that someone from the nearby neighborhood had made a mistake. His farm was located just outside a small suburban community, and while he wasn't part of their homeowners association, HOA, he occasionally interacted with some of the residents. But this was beyond a simple mistake. He was about to call the local authorities when he heard a voice behind him. "Oh, good. You're here." Jake turned to see a woman walking toward him. She was in her late 40s, dressed in a crisp white blouse and designer sunglasses. Her demeanor was calm, almost as if she owned the place. "Can I help you?" Jake asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. The woman smiled, a little too sweetly. "Yes, actually. I hope you don't mind, but I parked my car in your garage. The street parking is so tight, and I didn't want to risk scratching it." Jake stared at her, trying to process what she had just said. "You parked your car in my garage?" Without asking, she waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, don't worry. I saw that the space was empty, and I thought, why not? It's not like you're using it." Jake felt a surge of anger rising in his chest. He took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Ma'am, this is private property. You can't just park your car here without permission." The woman's smile didn't waver. "Oh, come on. It's just a car. It's not like I'm asking to move in. Besides, it's only for a few days. My husband took our usual parking spot, and I didn't want to leave it on the street." Jake clenched his fists, his patience wearing thin. "Listen, I don't care if it's just for a few hours or a few days. You can't just park your car on someone else's property without asking. It's called trespassing." The woman's smile finally faltered, replaced by a look of mild annoyance. "Well, I didn't think it would be a big deal. It's just a garage." Jake took another deep breath, trying to keep his temper in check. "It's not just a garage. It's my property. And you're trespassing." The woman sighed, as if Jake were the one being unreasonable. "Fine. I'll move it later. But really, you should be more considerate. Not everyone has the luxury of a private garage." Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Considerate? You're the one who parked your car on my property without asking." The woman rolled her eyes and walked away, leaving Jake standing there, fuming. He watched as she got into a second car, a luxury SUV, and drove off, leaving the sedan in his garage. Jake stood there for a moment, trying to decide what to do. He could call the police, but he knew it would be a hassle. He could try to reason with the woman, but something told him that wouldn't work. Then, an idea began to form in his mind. He walked back to the garage, a small smile playing on his lips. If she wanted to use his garage without permission, he would make sure she regretted it. Jake didn't waste any time. He went to his workshop and grabbed a heavy-duty padlock. He then walked back to the garage and secured the doors, making sure the sedan was trapped inside. He double-checked the lock, ensuring it was sturdy enough to withstand any attempts to break it. As he stepped back, Jake felt a sense of satisfaction. He had no intention of keeping the car there forever, but he wanted to teach the woman a lesson. She had invaded his property without a second thought, and now she would have to face the consequences. With the garage securely locked, Jake went back to his farmhouse and packed his bags. He had been planning a week-long fishing trip for months, and he wasn't about to let this incident ruin his plans. He loaded his truck with his gear, locked up the house, and drove off, leaving the sedan trapped in the garage. As he drove away, Jake couldn't help but smile. He knew the woman would be back, and he was looking forward to the moment she realized her car was locked inside his garage. Jake's fishing trip was everything he had hoped for. The weather was perfect, the fish were biting, and he had plenty of time to relax and unwind. But on the second day of his trip, His phone buzzed with a message. It was from the woman. "Hi, can you open the garage? I need to get my car." Jake chuckled to himself. He had expected this. He ignored the message and went back to fishing. The next day, another message came through. This one was less polite. "I need my car urgently. Can you open the garage now?" Jake smirked. Now it was urgent? Interesting. He continued to ignore the messages, enjoying his time away from the drama. On the fourth day, the call started. His phone rang repeatedly, but Jake didn't answer. He knew the woman was getting desperate, and he was enjoying every moment of it. Finally, he received a message that made him laugh out loud. "This is illegal. You can't just lock my car like that." Jake shook his head. Illegal? She was the one who had parked her car on his property without permission. If anyone was breaking the law, it was her. The messages continued, each one more desperate than the last. The woman threatened to call the police, but Jake knew she was bluffing. If she called the police, she would have to explain how her car ended up in his garage in the first place. And that was a conversation she didn't want to have. When Jake returned from his fishing trip, he was greeted by the sight of the woman standing in front of his garage, arms crossed, and a look of pure fury on her face. "You left me without a car for a whole week," she shouted as soon as she saw him. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Oh, now I'm the problem? Let's recap. You parked your car in my garage without asking, acted like you owned the place, and now you're mad because I didn't make your life easier?" The woman's face turned red with anger. "This is absurd. You can't just lock someone's car like that." Jake crossed his arms and leaned against his truck. "Actually, I can. It's my garage, my property. You're the one who decided to park there without permission. If anyone's in the wrong here, it's you." The woman opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. She knew Jake was right, but her pride wouldn't let her admit it. Finally, she took a deep breath and said, "Fine. Just open the garage so I can get my car." Jake smiled. "Oh, I'll open it. But first, we need to settle a few things." The woman frowned. "What things?" "First, you're going to admit that you were wrong. You're going to admit that you made a ridiculous and arrogant choice by parking your car in my garage without asking." The woman's eyes widened. "You've got to be kidding me." Jake shook his head. "Nope. I'm dead serious. If I open this garage now without any consequences, what's to stop you from doing it again?" The woman clenched her fists, clearly struggling to contain her anger. Finally, she muttered, "Fine. I was wrong. Now open the garage." Jake nodded. "Good. And second, you're going to pay me for the use of my garage." The woman's jaw dropped. "What? You used my space without permission, so I think it's fair to charge you for it. Consider it a parking fee." The woman looked like she was about to explode, but she knew she had no choice. She reached into her purse, pulled out a wad of cash, and handed it to Jake. Jake counted the money, making sure to take his time. When he was satisfied, he unlocked the garage and stepped aside. The woman practically ran to her car, got in, and drove off without another word. Jake watched her go, a satisfied smile on his face. He had won this round, but he had a feeling this wasn't the end of their little war. 3 days later, Jake received a notice in the mail. It was from the HOA, and it was a fine for improper use of community area. The fine was for $500. Jake laughed out loud when he saw it. His property wasn't part of the HOA, and he had never signed any agreements with them. This was clearly the woman's doing. She had gone to the HOA to try and get back at him. Jake crumpled up the notice and threw it in the trash. He wasn't going to pay a fine for something that didn't even apply to him. But the HOA wasn't done. A few days later, Jake received another notice, this time summoning him to a disciplinary meeting with the HOA committee. Jake knew this was going to be a fight, but he was ready. He gathered all the evidence he could, photos of the car in his garage, screenshots of the woman's messages, and proof that his property wasn't part of the HOA. When the day of the meeting arrived, Jake walked into the HOA office with his head held high. The room was filled with the usual suspects, a group of self-important HOA members who thought they had the power to control everyone's lives. The woman was there too, sitting in the corner with a smug smile on her face. The meeting began, and the HOA president, a balding man in an expensive suit, started by accusing Jake of violating the association's bylaws. Jake listened patiently, waiting for his turn to speak. When the president finally finished, Jake stood up and placed his dossier on the table. Before we continue, Jake said, I'd like to present some evidence. He opened the dossier and began to go through the photos and documents, showing the committee exactly what had happened. He explained how the woman had parked her car in his garage without permission, how he had locked it up, and how she had tried to intimidate him with the HOA. The room fell silent as Jake finished his presentation. The HOA members exchanged uneasy glances, realizing they had no case. Finally, the president cleared his throat and said, We'll review the case and get back to you. Jake smiled. Oh, you don't have to. I already have a lawyer. With that, he picked up his dossier and walked out of the room, leaving the HOA members and the woman in stunned silence. Jake never heard from the HOA again. The fine was dropped, and the woman avoided him like the plague. She never parked her car in his garage again, and Jake was finally able to enjoy his property in peace. But the experience had taught him a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the best way to deal with entitled people is to stand your ground and fight back. And if you do it right, you might just come out on top. As for the woman, she learned a lesson too, one she wouldn't soon forget. Sometimes, the best way to teach someone a lesson is to give them a taste of their own medicine. And in the end, Jake had the satisfaction of knowing that he had won the garage wars. Jake thought the garage incident was behind him. The woman had apologized, the HOA had backed off, and life on his farm had returned to its peaceful rhythm. But as the old saying goes, when you think you've seen it all, life has a way of surprising you. One crisp autumn morning, Jake was tending to his garden when he noticed a strange car slowly driving past his property. It wasn't the woman's sedan or her SUV. This was a different vehicle, a nondescript gray sedan with tinted windows. The car didn't stop, but it lingered just long enough to make Jake uneasy. He shook off the feeling, chalking it up to paranoia. After all, he had won the battle with the HOA and the entitled woman. What else could go wrong? But over the next few days, the gray sedan kept appearing. Sometimes it would drive by in the morning, other times in the evening. Jake never saw the driver, but he could feel their eyes on him. It was as if someone was watching him, waiting for the right moment to strike. Jake's unease grew. He started locking his gates at night and keeping a closer eye on his property. He even installed security cameras around the perimeter of his farm, just in case. Then, one evening, as Jake was closing up his barn, he heard a loud crash coming from the direction of his garage. He grabbed a flashlight and ran toward the noise, his heart pounding. When he reached the garage, he saw that the padlock had been cut and the doors were slightly ajar. Jake's stomach dropped. He pushed the doors open and stepped inside, his flashlight illuminating the space. The garage was empty. Jake's tools were scattered across the floor, and there were fresh tire tracks leading out of the garage. Someone had broken in and stolen his ATV, a rugged, all-terrain vehicle he used for tending to the far corners of his property. Jake clenched his fists, his anger boiling over. This wasn't just a random act of vandalism. This was personal. The next morning, Jake called the local sheriff's office to report the theft. Deputy Miller, a no-nonsense officer who had known Jake for years, arrived at the farm to take his statement. You think this has something to do with that HOA business? Deputy Miller asked as he examined the broken padlock. Jake nodded. I don't have proof, but it's too much of a coincidence. That woman, Karen, she was furious when I locked her car in the garage. And now this. Someone's trying to send me a message. Deputy Miller sighed. I'll look into it, Jake. But without evidence, there's not much I can do. Keep an eye out, and let me know if you see anything suspicious. After Deputy Miller left, Jake decided to take matters into his own hands. He reviewed the footage from his security cameras, hoping to catch a glimpse of the thief. The cameras had captured the gray sedan driving past his property multiple times, but the license plate was obscured and the driver's face was hidden behind tinted windows. Jake wasn't deterred. He knew the thief would strike again. They had taken his ATV, but they hadn't gotten what they were really after, revenge. Jake spent the next few days preparing. He reinforced the locks on his garage and installed motion-activated lights around his property. He also set up a decoy, a beat-up old truck that he parked in the garage, hoping to lure the thief into a false sense of security. Then, one night, his plan paid off. Jake was sitting in his farmhouse, watching the live feed from his security cameras, when he saw movement near the garage. The motion-activated lights flicked on, illuminating the figure of a man dressed in black, wearing a ski mask. Jake's heart raced as he watched the man approach the garage. The thief cut the new padlock with bolt cutters and pushed the doors open. When he saw the decoy truck, he hesitated for a moment, then climbed inside. That was Jake's cue. He grabbed his shotgun and ran outside, shouting, "Freeze! Don't move." The thief froze, his hands in the air. Jake approached cautiously, his shotgun trained on the man. "Step out of the truck." Slowly. The thief complied, stepping out of the truck with his hands raised. Jake kept his distance, his finger on the trigger. "Take off the mask." The man hesitated, then slowly pulled off the ski mask, revealing a face Jake didn't recognize. He was in his late 20s, with a scruffy beard and a nervous expression. "Who are you?" Jake demanded. "And why are you stealing from me?" The man swallowed hard. I was paid to do it. I don't even know who you are, man. Some lady hired me to mess with you." Jake's eyes narrowed. "What lady?" The man shrugged. "I don't know her name. She just said you had something she wanted. She paid me to take your ATV and, well, cause some trouble." Jake's mind raced. It had to be Karen. She had hired this guy to get back at him for humiliating her. "Where's my ATV?" Jake asked. The man hesitated, then said, "It's at a storage unit on the edge of town. I can take you there." Jake nodded. "You're going to take me there, and then you're going to tell the police everything. Understand?" The man nodded, his face pale. Jake called Deputy Miller, who arrived within minutes. Together, they followed the thief to the storage unit, where they found Jake's ATV hidden behind a stack of boxes. Deputy Miller arrested the thief and took him to the station for questioning. Meanwhile, Jake returned to his farm, his mind racing with thoughts of Karen. He knew he couldn't let this go. Karen had crossed a line, and he needed to confront her once and for all. The next morning, Jake drove to Karen's house, a large, modern home in the heart of the suburban community. He parked his truck in the driveway and walked up to the front door, his jaw set with determination. Karen answered the door, her eyes widening in surprise when she saw Jake. "What are you doing here?" Jake didn't mince words. "I know you hired that guy to steal my ATV. You've been trying to intimidate me ever since I locked your car in my garage. But this ends now." Karen's face turned red with anger. "I don't know what you're talking about." Jake stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "Cut the act, Karen. The guy you hired confessed. He's in police custody right now, and he's going to tell them everything. You're going to be charged with theft, vandalism, and conspiracy. How's that for a lesson in boundaries?" Karen's bravado faltered. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. Finally, she sighed and said, "Fine. I'll leave you alone. Just don't press charges." Jake shook his head. "It's too late for that. You brought this on yourself." With that, he turned and walked back to his truck, leaving Karen standing in the doorway, her face a mask of fear and regret. Karen was charged with multiple offenses, including theft and conspiracy. The case made headlines in the local news, and the HOA distanced themselves from her, claiming they had no knowledge of her actions. Jake's farm returned to its peaceful state, and he finally felt like he could breathe easy. He had stood his ground, fought back against Karen's entitlement, and come out on top. But the experience had changed him. He realized that sometimes peace comes at a price, and that price is vigilance. He continued to keep a close eye on his property, knowing that there would always be people like Karen who thought they could take what wasn't theirs. As for Karen, she moved out of the neighborhood shortly after the trial. Rumor had it she relocated to a city where she could blend into the crowd and avoid the consequences of her actions. Jake never saw her again, but he often thought about the lessons he had learned from their little war. Sometimes, the best way to deal with entitled people is to stand your ground, fight back, and never back down. And in the end, Jake had the satisfaction of knowing that he had won. Not just the garage wars, but the battle for his peace of mind. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story on Store of Good Stories. If this story touched your heart or made you think, don't forget to hit like and share the video to spread this positive message to more people. And if this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the meaningful stories we share every week. Your support is the biggest motivation for Store of Good Stories to keep bringing heartfelt and valuable stories to you. See you in the next video.